Hi everyone, Matt from UsefulCharts here. This is a special video that I'm going to make just for our Reddit community. So this is going to be an unlisted video that I'm going to post here on r/UsefulCharts, and I'll also put it into one of the playlists so people can find it. Basically, it's been quite a while since I've made a tutorial video, two years I think, and we get a lot of questions on the subreddit about how I make my charts, about fonts or styles or this sort of thing. So I thought I'd just make a quick video and address some of those. But first of all, before I begin, I just want to say how great this community is and how happy I am to see all the charts that everyone has been making. They're amazing. I also want to give a shout out to our moderators, two main moderators here who do a great work moderating the subreddit. Also, check this out. We now have 33,000 members. That's amazing. That puts us in the top 3% of subreddits by size. Now, it doesn't mention it here on the desktop version, but this is a screenshot I took from my phone. And on the mobile version, it also says here we are in the top 50 in creators and influencers. So that's like TikTok, TikTokers, Instagram people, YouTubers, everyone. We're in the top 50. That is amazing. I'm pretty sure this isn't based on size alone. I think it's based on engagement, upvotes, just how active the community is, and so forth. So this just means that everyone is doing such an amazing job. This just blows my mind that we're in the top 50. So I just wanted to shout out everyone and just say how happy I am that this community is doing so well. If you're not aware of it, on the Useful Charts channel, if you go under playlists, first off, take note that I've recently redone all my playlists. I've tried to add a bunch more categories so it's easier to find videos on different topics. So if you weren't aware of that, you might want to check it out. But one of the playlists that I've had for quite a while is called Fan-Made Charts and Tutorials. And this is where, first of all, I do all my end of the year highlights of fan-made charts nowadays from the Reddit. So we've done it 4 years in a row now, so that's amazing. This year, actually, since the subreddit is so busy and there's so much great stuff going on there, I'm actually going to do 2 overviews this year. So I'm going to do one at the end of June and then again at the end of December. There'll only be one contest for the year, the poster contest. That'll be, I'll announce the winners in December, but halfway through the year, I'll do kind of just a review of some charts that I've really enjoyed and try to highlight those. So keep that in mind for your chart making. If you want to perhaps get your chart in for my June review, make sure you get that in time. Probably if you get in by early mid-June, that'd be great. On this playlist, I also have 2 tutorials, so you can see my last one was 2 years ago, and then my original one was 4 years ago. The original one was about LibreOffice. Most of you probably know that originally I used to make my charts in LibreOffice. It's free, which is one of the best things about it, and I know a lot of you still use LibreOffice. Nowadays, I use Adobe Illustrator. It is software that you have to pay for. But in my opinion, it's definitely worth it. It's a much more powerful graphic design program. Now, in this video, I'm not going to go through again step by step how I make my charts because I've already done this in these 2 videos. So if you're new to the subreddit and you want to know how do I go about starting, how do I go about making a chart, you want to take a look at these 2 videos. Because in this video, I'm mostly going to be talking about more advanced things and about style in general, my style that I use. But before I jump into it, first of all, I have to address this. Someone mentioned the other day on the subreddit. You might have noticed that suddenly the colors have changed, not only on the channel, also on my website. and the moderators also changed it here on the subreddit, also on the site formerly known as Twitter and all other social media. So this is kind of a branding thing that I've decided to do. You probably know this is the most recent chart that we've released. It's our World Religions Family Tree chart. And for this chart, I decided to go with this red. It's not really red, it's more of a maroon or burgundy border. And what I'm going to be doing in future is I'm going to be using this burgundy border for all of my charts. It's kind of a branding thing for a couple reasons. First of all, it'll create some continuity and also recognizable. It'll make the charts more recognizable. So if someone sees a chart on the wall and recognizes this burgundy border, they'll be like, hey, that's from UsefulCharts. Kind of like the National Geographic logo is that yellow border. Everyone knows the yellow border means National Geographic. In future, hopefully this color will be associated with the brand UsefulCharts. The other big reason why I wanted to do this is there's so many charts out there, first of all, that are based on my style that you all have been producing and putting on the subreddit, and that's great. But I wanted a way to distinguish between fan-made charts and official charts. Also, unfortunately, there's a lot of scammers out there who are ripping off my charts and selling them on Amazon and whatnot. So I kind of want to have a more clear brand so that if you see this logo, if you see the right color, you know it's official. I mean, obviously people could still rip off the color. Hopefully they don't do that. But at least for those of you who are creating charts on the subreddit, I would like to ask two things. There are only two things that I ask. Don't use my logo, and from this point forward, don't use this color. I mean, use any other color for a border, just as long as it's not this color or anything close to it. Let's reserve that for the official UsefulCharts charts, and if it's any other color, that's fine. So eventually, as I reprint the other charts, they will all have the maroon border. So those are really the only two things that I ask when you're creating a chart based on my style. Don't use the logo, don't use that color. Other than that, I really don't mind people copying my style. I think it's great. I also wanted to say that you don't have to copy my style. There's a lot of people who post on the subreddit who have developed their own styles, and I think that's great. I love seeing the various styles. Some of them are just kind of a tweak on my own style. Some of them are totally new. I think that's great. So let's take a look at this. This is a file that I created for you in Adobe Illustrator, and I'm going to go through it today. One of the subredditors has also created a version in LibreOffice for me, so we'll post that as well for those of you who use LibreOffice. And actually what I'll do is I'll probably take both files, as well as the fonts, as well as the logo, everything you need, and put it into a zip file. And then we'll upload that zip file somewhere. We'll link to it here in this video, in the description, pinned comment. We'll link to it on the Reddit post. You can get that zip file, download it. It's going to have all these files in it. And that way you can use it, either copy the various elements within it or use it just as a guide for what fonts, sizes, etc. Okay, so the first thing I want to point out is this new logo. We had one that was created a few months ago, but this one going forward is kind of going to be the official fan-made chart logo. So as you can see, it looks a lot like the UsefulCharts logo, but it says fan-made chart. And then it has the Reddit address. So if someone sees this, it gets posted somewhere else on the internet, they can say, okay, what is this? They can go to the subreddit and they can learn all about it. So you can get this logo within this file. I'll also post it separately as a PNG file, probably with a transparent background, so you can put it on any background. Maybe I'll upload a few with different color backgrounds as well, so you can use this logo. Of course, you don't have to use this logo. Some of you have your own logos. That's great as well. The other thing I want to mention off the bat is this logo over here, or symbol. This stands for Creative Commons. It's an organization that kind of produces licenses for information that's being shared on the internet. So normally, people who create things, you copyright it so that you created it and nobody else can copy it. So my charts, for example, are all copyrighted by the UsefulCharts company. However, if you want to make something freely available online, I suggest that you always post this symbol on your graphic. You can put it at the bottom, at the top, wherever you want. But basically, this licenses your image to be used by others for free, so long as they follow 3 rules. One is they have to credit you. So by, they have to say who the chart is by or who the image is by. And I suggest always putting that information right below the symbol. So you can put your name here. And that way, if someone copies your image, posts it on a social media site or anywhere else, they have to keep this and they have to keep your name there so that people will know who did this. You don't have to use your real name. You can use your Reddit handle, whatever. This one's, I think, the most important, and that is that people can't use your chart and then make money off it. So this NC stands for non-commercial. So that means that someone can't steal your chart, print it, and start selling it and making money off it without giving money to you. So this means that people can use it for free, but they can't make money off it. And this final one, this SA means share alike. It just means that if someone makes any changes, slight changes, and then shares it again somewhere else, they have to share it with this same license. They can't just delete this and erase it and then share it for free and make money off it and stuff like that. So this is for safety. I would recommend, if you put a lot of effort and time into making a chart, go ahead and put this on there, because once something's on the internet, you just never know who's going to copy it and use it, and it can go farther than you might imagine. Okay, let's talk about the border and title. Most of you probably know the main font that I use for the title is Bebas New Regular. 88 points is the size. The other main font that I use within the chart is Althos Grotesque. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. If you're a follower of the channel, you know I'm pretty bad at pronunciation in general. So this is the font that I use kind of throughout my charts. The only time I don't use this font, unfortunately, this particular font isn't available in italics. It's only regular or bold. So sometimes if I really want to italicize something, I'll just go with some other kind of basic font like Arial, and so that I can italicize it. But other than that, I always try to use this font for notes on the side, for names, titles, everything. The only other font I use is this one, Apple Chancery, on my Royal Family Tree charts for kingdom names and whatnot. So again, I'm going to put all these fonts in the zip file as well. Take note that this is the same font. It's the Althos Grotesque, but it's got tracking 200. So tracking means that the letters are spaced out. I'm sure you can do this in LibreOffice as well, but in Adobe Illustrator, you go to Character Settings, and here this is the setting for tracking. And if you change that, see how the spacing can get smaller or wider. So basically, that's just the font is spread out a little bit. Let's go back here to the border. How do I make this border? First of all, this is the brown color that I've used for quite a while. I know some of you use it as well. If you want to keep continuing using the brown for your borders, that's fine. As I said, I'm going to switch to maroon. You've got the hex code for that border color here. You probably know that if you're doing any kind of design work, layers are very important. I always have at least 2 layers in my document. One is the background layer, which I always keep locked. Again, there's a way to do this in LibreOffice as well. I lock it so that as I'm moving items around inside my chart, I don't slip and like move the background at all. So I just keep that locked so it doesn't move around, whereas I can move everything else around. But for now, let's go ahead and make the chart invisible on Adobe Illustrator. We just do that so that we just have this background. And I'm going to unlock the background so that we can talk about the various elements that I have here. I've grouped the logo elements. Let's just remove all this stuff. Oop, see, there you go. See, that's what I was talking about, slipping. There's many ways that you could do this border. The simplest way, and the way I've done it here, is you simply choose your border color and just make one giant square to put on your background. And you just cover your entire artboard with that color. So this is just a square. In Adobe Illustrator, here are your 2 color controls. One is for the fill, and the other one's for the line. So there's no line, there's no border, but it's a brown fill. And then I create another one, another square, so just like this, but fill it with the beige background color, and then make it have a white line around it. If we zoom in here, you can see there's a white line. And these days as well, I've decided to add kind of a curve. So here's the original one here. You can see I've put that curve. And if you want to be more specific about it, you can go under the shape properties. I mentioned in my last tutorial, I've got things set up in a certain way that works for me. If you're using Adobe Illustrator, all these various tools might be somewhere else. You can find them through the menu system or shortcut keys or through icons. It's going to be there somewhere. But if you find your shape properties, you can actually, if you unlink this, you can actually make each corner differently. So if you wanted only your top left rounded, but you wanted everything else square, you can actually do that by, make this 0, and you can make everything different if you wanted to. If you lock it, if you change one, it's going to keep the proportion. Let's just put that all back to 12. Okay, once it's locked, if you increase it, say to 15, it's going to increase all of it. So 12 was what I had originally, and you can make your border as thin or thick as you want just by changing the size of this box. Always make the top thicker, of course, so that I can put in the title and the logo and stuff like that. So let me just go ahead and undo all this stuff that I've done and go back to where we were. So that's how I make my border, the title, etc. I'm going to talk about the new color palette at the end. So before I do that, I'm going to talk about some of the elements. Although I will point out that there's that background color beige that I use, the hex code for that. So what I tried to do with this here is kind of just give you an example of all the various elements that I use in my chart. The various types of lines, boxes, etc. But before we go through that, actually, let me just talk about how I set up this document. If we make both these layers invisible, I don't know why that did that, but let's just do this. You can see that there's a grid behind. I always like to use a grid. You can do this on LibreOffice. You can do it on Adobe Illustrator. I always like to use a grid because then it's just easy for like lining things up. You can see how many spaces between each element and try to keep them equal and so forth. But depending on how you set up your grid, it might end up being very different from what I've got here. So if I start talking about lines and say, well, this should be a 5-pixel line, if your whole grid is set up differently, it might look totally different. So let me just explain how I've set this up. First of all, when you create a new document, again, I'm just using Adobe Illustrator here. There's going to be something similar in LibreOffice. You can size this to whatever you want, the size of your document. If you want to make a full poster size, like my own posters, so if you're doing a chart for the contest, you want to make it 24 by 36 inches, or anything that has that aspect ratio. So it's basically 2 by 3 is the aspect ratio. And that's going to make the standard poster size that we use here in North America, which is 24 by 36. I know in Europe you have A1, A2, etc. I print here in Canada. North America we use inches, and the standard poster size is 24 by 36. But if you're just making a chart to share on Reddit, it's just going to be used on a screen. You can make it whatever size you want, although I suggest not making it too wide or too high, so it's a funny aspect ratio. It makes it harder for sharing. If you make it kind of square-ish, or at least a rectangle that's not too disproportionate, is probably good. But the big thing here I wanted to show is your resolution. It's called raster effects here, but this is basically talking about the resolution of the document. The default for anything that you're just using to show on a screen is 72 ppi. ppi stands for pixels per inch. So this means that for every inch, there's going to be 72 pixels. You can go much higher than that, but this is not actually going to do much in terms of making it higher resolution on a screen, because the human eye can't really see more than 72 pixels per inch. So unless you're zooming in a lot, if you have it at 72 ppi, that's fine for the human eye. The human eye can't see more than that. These are actually for printing. So when you print something, you can do it in higher resolution. That just has to do with the printing process. But again, 72 ppi is probably all you need for what you're doing. So if you have it set up as 72 ppi and then you set up your grid, I'm using a Mac, so if you're on Windows, again, it might be a little bit different, but somehow you'll be able to find your preferences, and you're going to be able to go to Guides and Grid. And here, this is set up for a grid line every 72 pixels. So when it says grid line, it means the main grid line, these darker ones. So basically, each one of these big squares is 1 inch by 1 inch. Or 72 pixels, because it's 72 pixels per inch. And then there's 8 subdivisions in each larger square. So let's see, 72 divided by 8 is, oh geez, I don't know, 96? No, 72, what's 8? I can't do math right now. Geez, someone put it in the comments. How many pixels are in each one of these little squares? Actually, you know what? I can just go to my calculator. 72 divided by 8. Okay, 9 pixels. 9 pixels per square. Okay. So why all of this is important is because if you had your document set up differently with different grid lines and especially a different resolution, if I said this line is, 5 pixels wide, it's going to look different. So that's why I just wanted to go through the setup. Although, take note that if you want to make a much bigger chart, if I zoom out here, you can see, you're only going to be able to fit so many things within this square. If you wanted to make a much bigger chart, like when I'm doing my poster size charts, I basically use about half. I use about half of all these proportions. So my images, instead of being 8 little squares by 8, I'd make them 4 by 4, and I'd make this, half as big. Sorry, that's not half. That's half. And then here, you can see here I've shown you that the names in the boxes, I usually use the bold font 16 points. You can click here and see that that's correct. But if I was making that smaller, again, I just divide everything by 2. So I'd make that 8 points. This is 12, so I'm going to make that 6. But then your spacing, you can see, is off. You can get that under character. Again, divide that by 2. And there, I've just made everything smaller. I mean, you can also, actually no, sorry, I've set it so that you can't do it that way. But if you select both of them at the same time, I think it will automatically, yeah, it will shrink the font for you. But sometimes I like to be a little bit more precise. So, and then if you want to make sure that this lines up, there's lots of different ways you can do this, but one thing that I do, you'll notice that right now this is set to snap to grid, so that as I move things around, it always snaps to the grid. Again, I apologize if I'm going a little bit fast here, but I'm assuming that you've already watched the other tutorials. You're familiar with graphic design programs in general. That's why I'm not slowing it down and explaining every little thing. But if we take that, let's put this back. Let's take snap to grid off so that I can move this around freely, and then I can shrink that box, the text box that the text is in, so that it's just perfectly from edge to edge. And why I'm going to do that is now if I select both of these and use my align to align it, it's going to perfectly center it for me. And then I can turn my grid back on and put it back. Okay, so basically I just took one of these squares, I made it smaller for you just to demonstrate, you know, if you wanted to make a bigger chart. Also for the line, 5-pixel line on this chart, but if I'm making everything half as big, I can just change that to 2.5. And there we go. While I'm here, I'll point out, always make sure you leave enough padding between the text and the box. So for example, if you have like a really long name and it gets too close to the edges here, I find it doesn't look quite as nice. So I always try to you know, leave it at least kind of this amount of space. Same for this way, if you know, you don't want to cram in so much information in your box that you know, it's getting too close to the edges. So just keep an eye out for that. If you do have a name that's really long, all you have to do is make your box a little bit bigger, and then you have more room for a longer name. Or if you have, you know, lots of other information you want to put in, several different dates or titles or whatever, you might just need to make your box bigger. Or you can always make the font smaller. So there you go. Let's see what else I want to show you about. I'm just undoing everything I've done. Go back to this. I've already explained about how to do this in the tutorial. Note that I used to make just kind of a rounded square like this, but nowadays I do kind of full circles for my house names. Most of you are probably aware I use solid lines for agnatic connections, which are male line only connections. Dotted lines are for female. Or actually they're for cognatic lines. Cognatic lines are for not just females, but any line that includes a combination of males and females. So if there's any kind of connection to a female, whether it's a son to a mother or a father to a daughter, I use these dotted lines, either coming down like this, or if it's at the end, something like this. And on this proportion, these female lines are always a little smaller, so 3, and then dotted. So if we look at that stroke, it's also going to be a 3-pixel dash followed by a 3-pixel gap, and then it's 3 pixels wide. I sometimes use lines like this, just like, for example, if a particular state is moving from control of one family to another family, I might use that, or for some sort of event. I show here an example of a solid line or a dotted line. These are basically 1 pixel wide. I usually change the size of the arrowhead, though. For some reason, Adobe Illustrator always makes the arrow a little bit too big for my liking, so I tend to make that a little smaller. I'll also point out here, if I cross one line over another line, I always basically do a system where I just leave a little bit of a gap so that you can understand that this line is kind of going underneath the other line. What else? Oh, these days I use a lot more kind of rounded lines because I think they look nice. So if you want to do rounded lines in Adobe Illustrator, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. The easiest is to just use the arc tool, and that just allows you to make basically a quarter of a circle, and then you can change your line. You can change all of the attributes for it. So I just kind of put that in separately. Oh, one thing I should show, if you're not using rounded corners, what I do is if you go under stroke, you can have a flat ending or a rounded ending. You can also use this, which I never use because it makes things not line up very nicely. If I'm connecting 2 lines together, I always make sure one of them is a rounded cap. That way it looks like this as opposed to this, which doesn't look as nice. Generally, if you want kind of a hard and fast rule, just use the rounded caps for horizontal lines and use flat caps for vertical lines. That way, if you have a situation like this, where you have a name and you want that nice hard edge there, you don't have to worry about it. But at the same time, if you're joining it to another line, it'll always look nice. However, if you want to make it rounded, I always make every element separate. Siawish, who's the animator for the channel, he thinks this is ridiculous that I do it this way, that I make every element separately and put them all together. Because Illustrator does have other ways for you to make lines where you can just make one line and move it around. But what I find is, as I'm making a chart, I like to make a lot of changes as I go. And if anything is automated on the chart and you start messing around with it, Illustrator will do automatic things that sometimes don't look as nice. So I just like to keep all my elements separately. That way I have full control over how things look. You'll notice that sometimes, especially on my religion charts, when I'm dealing with organizations or religious branches instead of people, I use this style where I have rounded corners over the whole box and I have this additional line here. This is nothing fancy. This is just a box on top of these boxes. So I have a box here with my text box. I have an image, in this case, just a sample logo. And then I just create a new square, using this tool here. And I put it on top of the whole thing. And then use this to round those corners, but round it just enough so this doesn't show through. Like that. And that's all there is to it. Same thing with when I make boxes that look like this. Same thing. This is just a box, additional box on top of a box with a clear fill. Obviously, if this was some sort of color and I put it on top, it would block everything underneath. But if you just make that no fill, you've just got the border with no fill. And you just place it on top and you can round those corners. You can round it just enough so you don't see that little tip. Now, those ones are showing there. Oops. Let's cover it a little bit more. Why do I sometimes use this format as opposed to this format? You'll notice that when I'm talking about, say, presidents or someone like Elon Musk or like current day people, I usually use this format. When I talk about royal family trees, I use this format. And the reason for that is not really about the topic, but more about the type of tree. When I'm doing a tree that's like this huge, long, 1,000-year-old dynasty, I use this format because it's wide, but not very tall. So if you have like 10 generations in a row, and you're not really talking about lots of siblings in each row, you can fit more, within a vertical space. Whereas when I'm talking about people nowadays, I'm often adding more like all of their siblings, different wives maybe, step siblings. And so you got to fit more people this way, horizontally. So if you use this vertical format for the box, you can fit more people in this way. If you used it the whole thing would become so much more wider. So that's basically why I have those two different formats. This line here, you probably know, is for like a distant descendant. So this means that there's a bunch of generations missing. That's a 5-point line. No dash. The reason why it's no dash is because if you use a round cap, it actually kind of creates a circle instead of a dash. So basically, if it was on this flat cap, you wouldn't really have anything. It kind of just shows you the tiniest little line. So if you keep that 0 but make it round cap, you end up with a circle. And then I've got a 16 pixel gap in between. That just kind of means that there's some generations missing. Nowadays, for illegitimate children, I actually use this kind of gray line with square dashes. It's a 2-pixel line. You can see 6 dash gap. I used to do it a little bit different way. I used to take a line like this and put a special arrowhead that's actually like, and where is it? There it is. I use these for things that have gone extinct as well. It just creates kind of a T. But if you make that smaller, the ending there, I used to just do this and put 2 lines together, and it makes it look like there's on a break or something like that. I sometimes use that for illegitimate children or illegitimate relationships. But nowadays, I've tended to do this instead, like on the new European Royal Family Tree West chart. Of course, colors often change between houses. If one ruler rules 2 different countries, I'll often like put the different color down here with the different title and dates. I think I've covered all the elements. If there's anything that you're not sure of, you can ask a question in the comments. I'd ask the question in the video comments, not the Reddit comment, although you can do both. But if you ask in the video comment, I'm more likely to see it and answer. Or else I'm sure there's lots of other members of the community that would love to help and answer your question as well. So again, you can use this file, you can download this file, and then you can get all this stuff and you can just copy, paste. I mean, when I'm making charts, I often do a lot of copy and pasting. I'll just, make the box once and just copy it a bunch of times. Another thing style-wise is spacing. In this proportion, I usually keep about 3 or 4 squares between elements. So this way, between siblings, at least 3 or 4 squares. Depends on how dense the chart is, how many people want to fit in. But take note, though, that when I make charts, I don't space things by generation. I space things by element, which means like here, the number of squares between each generation is 8. but that doesn't mean that I'm going to, do this. Sorry, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. I'm not going to do this because that just makes too big of a gap. That's not necessary because I'm not showing any other siblings there. So if there's no siblings, if there's no horizontal line, I just put 4 squares between 2 generations. However, if I'm going to need a line to show siblings and whatnot, I leave 4 between the line and the first square, and then another 4 between the next generation. So that's just about spacing. Spacing is very important in graphic design, whether it's this kind of spacing, which we call padding, or spacing between elements. If you add too much spacing, it doesn't look good. It's hard to move around and for the brain to kind of put together things in your head. And if you use not enough spacing, again, it's too tight and things get mixed up. So you want to get your spacing just right and just, not too much, not too little. All right, then the last thing I'll talk about is this color palette. It's very similar to what I've been using for the last several years, but just about a month ago, I did some final tweaks, and this is my current official color palette. And if you want to use it, go ahead. Just don't steal my maroon color for the border. But feel free to use these colors or use your own colors. Now, the reason why I tweaked this a bit, I'd been wanting to do this for a long time, but basically I did some testing for color blindness. One of my sons, I have 2 sons, the youngest is colorblind, as are about 8% of all males. Colorblindness is much more common among males than females, and 8% is a pretty big number. So if you make something with colorblind people in mind, it's a good idea because 8% is a lot of people that are going to be looking at your chart and struggle with colorblindness. There are a lot of great tools available where you can do this testing. I'm going to show you one. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to screenshot my color palette. On a Mac, you just hit Shift-Command-4, and that screenshots it. You can do that on Windows using print screen. And it's going to save it over here to my desktop. And let's go back to my browser. And if you just Google color blindness simulator, you'll probably find this, and there's a bunch of other ones. This is color-blindness.com. If you go down here, all you have to do is you just drag an image into here over top these crayons, and it puts your image there. And then what you can do is you can simulate different types of color blindness. Now, the 2 most important are going to be these 2 here, protanopia and deuteranopia. Basically, this is a form of red blindness and green blindness. Most people that are colorblind are not like monochrome colorblind. People think colorblind, they think people see everything gray. That's not true. There's some people with that type of colorblindness, but that's really rare. Most people have what's called red-green colorblindness, which means that I don't know exactly, but in the cones in their eyes, the red and green cones are too close together, so either you can't see red or you can't see green. So that's why there's 2 different types. Some people can't see red, some people can't see green. And these 2 are about equal, but together they make up about 8% of all males. So I guess 4% and 4%. Blue blind is very rare. So this is how it looks normally to a normal person with normal color vision. And this is how it's going to look to someone with red blind color blindness. And you can see that basically you can still distinguish between everything fairly well, especially if you keep things separated. I made a mistake on my Roman emperor's chart, and I used a purple and a blue that were very close in tone and very difficult for colorblind people to tell apart. So what I did was I made my purple just a little bit darker and the blue a little bit lighter so that it's a little bit easier to distinguish. I did the same thing with, I changed my green so that the red and green are a little easier. But even in these cases, if you're making a chart, don't put red and green too close together. Don't put a blue and a pink too close together. Try to separate those colors out and you'll probably be fine. I'll just show you for someone with green blind color blindness, the whole thing looks a little bit more red. But again, you can see how everything can be distinguished pretty well. So yeah, that's why my color palette looks a little bit different. Mostly it's just that green is a slightly different tone so that it's easier to distinguish from the red. Personally, I like to keep things to just these 8 colors. In fact, pink I even like to avoid. Orange I only use if I really, really need it. If you're working with 3 colors, I would say use blue, yellow, red, because those are going to be the easiest for anyone to distinguish. But if you need more colors, add in green, then purple, orange, pink last. And the neutral's fine. That's just kind of a light grayish beige color. Here you've got the hex codes for everything as well. If you want to use like a chart and have way more colors, that's fine. Personally, from a design point of view, I think it's actually better to just use kind of the same colors twice, but on different parts of the chart. So you could use, say, blue for France, but then also for some other country, but as long as they're not right next to each other, it's fine. Or you can use a slightly different color. It's up to you, whatever you like. So again, you don't need to use these colors, but if you want to use them going forward, they're going to be my official colors. Now, of course, I still sell some charts that don't have those colors or have, my previous color palette, but every time I have to do a new print run, what I will do is I'll update these to my newer color palette, and all the borders in future will be the new maroon. Notice as well that I've actually increased my border a little bit, put a little bit more spacing here so that when people frame these, the title doesn't come too close to the frame. So there you go. So I think I've explained everything there. Again, if you have questions, do let me know in the comments or ask the community. I find one of the great things about our subreddit is that people tend to be quite friendly and nice and polite, and I like that. So if you have a question, just ask. There is an FAQ here pinned at the top that deals with some frequently asked questions as well. So, I have to shout out this. I saw this the other day. A triplet 123, a frequent flyer on the subreddit, posts a lot, posted this the other day, and oh my God, look how huge this thing is. I think this was made by combining a bunch of other charts that were made, but this thing goes like all the way from mythology, Zeus there at the top, through the Roman Republic period, through Roman Empire, Eastern Roman Empire, and then like all the way down to modern Europe, some Islamic dynasties here, European dynasties. I mean, this thing is huge, huge. I know there's been some other really huge charts on the Reddit as well. Shout out to all of you who put in a lot of time and effort making great charts. All right, thanks for watching.